What's up, everybody? Coast to Coast slash Postgame podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. All right, y'all. For those of you who are tuned in, expecting to see this live, I apologize. This is a Coast to Coast podcast. We decided since North Carolina had the vaunted Saturday to Monday quick turnaround that we would do the Coast to Coast tonight rather than doing it last night in between the Clemson and Miami games. And after the 91-71 drubbing of Clemson in Chapel Hill, things starting to feel good again. People back off the ledge and stop thinking the Tar Heels are terrible. Well, the Tar Heels come out and play what can only be described as just a gross first 14 minutes of the second half and kind of nullify that Clemson win. I think it wipes out all the good vibes because of the way this loss happened tonight against the Miami Hurricanes, 80-72 in the Smith Center. With me as always, diaper changer extraordinaire, Sean Moran. Sean, how you doing?
Would have been doing better if we'd done this after Saturday than tonight, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, and fresh off of his latest following the tour of the locks, Sherrell McMillan. Sherrell, how you doing, man?
I'm all right, man. I'm really anxious to talk about this one. There's a lot going on, it seems like.
Dude, and I apologize to everybody because this is a post game podcast. We just don't have as many notes and stuff that we usually have for our coast to coast. We're going to try to do this is do it justice, and thank you guys for being here, guys. First things I want to start out with. North Carolina looked as if they had kind of played tough in the first half. I think some bounces didn't go their way. Some of the 50-50 balls that coaches like to talk about. Yeah, there was one sequence where North Carolina actually got a floor burn. Shout out to Tommy Ashley. He likes to talk about that on Inside Carolina Live with me on Saturday mornings. Carolina gets a floor burn, gets the ball up court. Caleb Love has the ball taken away, and then Miami goes back the other way and gets a three-pointer in what was essentially a 5-point swing. And North Carolina can never really stretch this out. Stop me when you've heard this before. Quick stats from the game against the Miami Hurricanes. Again, Tar Heels lose 80-72. They're out rebounded by Miami 42-35. I think a lot of that was because of Armando Bacot's foul trouble. Sherrell's going to grimace when I say this. 6 assists on 29 field goals, which if you watch the second half, that all makes sense. But when you see it in a vacuum, it's just revolting as it stands. 5 from 31 for three. At one point, the Tar Heels were 2 of 23 from three. And that's after shooting incredibly well from in the paint. They shot 51% in the first half, and that's while going 1 of 11 from behind the arc. I don't know why they got away from taking the ball inside, even with Armando Bacot. Sherrell, I'm going to come to you first. Why was what was working in the first half just completely abandoned out of the break? And I mean, to give you a two-parter here, is that coaching, or is that the players just not understanding and not following what the coaches are telling them, or is it both?
Well, if they're continuing to do it, then it's coaching, and they continue to do it. So at some point, the coach has to say, "Stop doing that because it's not working." So that's one part of it. But two, these are also, as we've said ad nauseum over the last 5 months, really, really experienced players who just do things inexplicably that you would expect, seniors in high school and freshmen in college to do, or to know better, really. So I think who's to blame? I think both are. The coach for allowing it, and then the team for not kind of settling into something different. It's really strange that, as you said, they shot so well when they were driving, and give Miami credit too, because they did make adjustments. But
Mm-hmm.
Carolina was driving to the lane. Armando Bacot, when you were texting back and forth, he was like a left guard in the first half, just clearing out space for guys to go to the rim. And I thought, wow, that's a good adjustment by Bacot, realizing that he's not getting the ball in the post and they're doubling off of Nance and Leaky almost every possession. There's 5 guys in the paint. So by, blocking them off, they were getting to the lane. Now in the second half, it seems like Miami changed that a little bit. And instead of continuing to probe, continuing to try to get into the paint, UNC started settling. And then when Baycott got in foul trouble, is as if it's as if they couldn't like go inside the 3-point line to shoot. Like there was a invisible barrier that once Baycott goes out, it has to be threes. And that's just honestly, that's mental toughness. I think we've talked about that a lot over the years. Like mental toughness is not taking the easy three, continuing to try to probe and try to find a good shot. And then, we can't let their defense go either. Defensively, there are a lot of times where, guys back down defenders. Davis was back down a few times. Love lost his man a few times. Puff, I know everybody likes to see him play a lot, but there were a few times where his man drove him down. Really, everybody down the roster. Nance, even Baycott. The defense was not was not good. So, just a really, I think, I don't want to say poor effort because I do think they do play hard, but when you shoot 2 of 22 from three, and then you keep shooting threes, you kind of deserve to lose because you're not adjusting and changing what needs to happen to from the first half to the second half.
Sean, have you ever seen a situation where North Carolina just looks as completely disconnected as they looked after looking fairly together for not only the first half of this game against Miami, but for the Clemson game? Again, it's this team is continuing to be consistently inconsistent. But have you ever seen that quick of a shift in a game? And if so, what do you think causes it?
It was a quick shift, and they got punched in the mouth with the 4 points right out of the half by Miller. But it was really a common theme that they go into the half down one. I would have given them kind of a B plus, high B in terms of how they played. They were 1 for 11 from three. That was the main story. But they really picked up, for the most part, offensively. They picked up from the Clemson game in terms of the ball movement, making the extra pass, moving quickly, getting the ball up and down the court. And they shot extremely well from two, but it's one of those halves where they find themselves down one instead of up 5 or 6 at least. I think the play that you described at the very beginning, that was, I put that in dark red in terms of when that happened, because if they score there, the crowd is into it. They're up 5. I think there would have been their largest lead. Instead, it's a tie game a few seconds later, and that's really been the story throughout the ACC season, where there's these handful of games their lead should have had a lead, or their lead should have been bigger in the first half. Clemson, they're up 9, but the majority of games, it might be 2 points or down a point. And I think that's really where they're losing these games, because Miami didn't really go on any significant runs in the first half. They start that second half with the run, but there's not the cushion to work with. And then to Sherrell's point, UNC quickly reverted back to almost the start of the Wake Forest game or the other games where they're settling. They're moving the ball around, but they're not moving with a purpose. And all of a sudden, you're hearing the crowd chant down 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and they're forcing up a tough shot that's not going in. They're not getting the rebound, and then they're not playing great D. So it really happened very quickly in terms of how they played in the first half, played together, and then it really reverted back to what we've seen. I'd say 75% of the season.
There was also a possession in the second half. I think North Carolina was coming out of a timeout. It may have been around the under 16 or somewhere around there, where they came out and immediately out of the timeout, turn the ball over. Miami goes down and scores. There was another one immediately out of a timeout where North Carolina, calls a play and ends up. Again, I don't know what the play was called. Maybe Trevor can help with that, but it really was North Carolina settling for a late in the shot clock 3, which they missed, and that started a string of 3 straight possessions where they missed, threes late in the shot clock. Sean, how do you fix that? Because at this point, this team is a bad shooting team. I think we all thought at the beginning of the year that, they would improve their shooting. That hasn't happened. They haven't improved as individual shooting. There are times where players get hot. Caleb Love has started to shoot better, but even he tonight, down the stretch, the whole team just couldn't throw it in the ocean if they were sitting in a boat. How do you fix that?
Well, I think right now it almost is what it is, where it's really the power of the 3. They're hitting the 3 against Clemson. They're able to score quickly. They're able to extend the game. Prior to Clemson, I actually went back and watched the Marquette game in the tournament, and it was interesting to watch because the first 5 or so minutes were pretty. They're playing, it was a tie game. They're playing they're playing down to Marquette's level. Marquette missed a bunch of wide open threes, but all of a sudden, you get fouled on the 3, you hit another 3, and it's 6-9 points right in a row, which is what Clemson was. And that's why the first half, the 1 for 11, they're getting good shots, and I think they were getting them off of Caleb Love driving and kicking. RJ making an extra pass or moving the ball. But then in the second half, it did revert back to I'd say the tougher 3-point shots, which is what RJ and Caleb have really relied on for the majority of the year, which are low percentage shots. And they weren't finding the open man. I think part of that did have to deal with Miami's defense. They were playing very aggressive. They had Omier really hard hedging the screens and making RJ take a few steps back, and they weren't able to move the ball and hit whether it's somebody rolling or hit that open man, and that's just killing 5-7 seconds off the shot clock. So, can they fix it? I mean, I think it comes down to can they play together and play quick and play with a purpose for not 40 minutes, but say 30, 34 to 35, or if they're playing like they did in the second half. Last week you asked us, Joey, what do we think for the final 8 games? I don't think I gave an answer, but in my head I was thinking 3-5, 4-4, and they're still right there. Unfortunately, we had the high of the Clemson where you thought maybe everything was fixed, and then it really reverted back to that, what we had been seeing in the second half.
And it's not fun. And we've talked about how these shows are not fun when the team's not winning, but such is the job. Sherrell, we don't like to single out individual players here, but I want to do a good and one that hasn't been so good. Leaky with his second career double-double tonight, 13 points and 10 rebounds. I think for all of the things that he's started to do well, including, still somewhat of a threat from three, Pete Nance has kind of gone the other way. And I think for this team to succeed, they've got to get something out of his position. When you look at he and Puff Johnson tonight, who both essentially play that 4 spot, Puff finished with 2 points, Nance finished with 2 points. Combined, they had 7 rebounds. And that's just it. Do you feel like, again, I'm not asking you to be a psychologist and I'm not going to criticize the player, but do you feel like Pete may just be in his own head a little bit, or do you think he's trying too hard? What do you think might be going on? Because he was so much more reliable and seemingly comfortable early in the season, and it's just like he doesn't have that comfortability right now.
Yeah, he's definitely in his head. I mean, there's always a point in time when someone plays at Carolina where you can literally see them thinking on the court, what am I supposed to do right now? And I think Nance, because I think he's missed like 17 or 18 straight threes. He's made 7 since the Citadel game. Now, obviously, he missed a few games in that stretch, maybe 3 games, but the Citadel game was before Christmas. So he's made 7 threes since Christmas. And there was one possession where Bacot is wide open under the rim, and Nance has the ball in the wing, and you can see him think, oh, I'm going to shoot this 3. And then you can see him say, oh, no, I shouldn't shoot it because I'm not shooting well, so I'm going to drive. And instead, he got called for a travel because he's just thinking too much. So he's definitely in his head. I do think he's not 100%. Several people have said he receives like a warmer for his back, during timeouts and stuff. But he's not playing well. And, that's when it comes down to it, that's all that people care about. And he's not. So the thing is, though, when he's not playing well, it's your hope that that's one of the nights that Puff Johnson is on. And tonight just wasn't that night. So it's kind of a killer when that 4 spot, which is really important to how UNC wants to play, gives you 4 points and it's 0-7 from 3. I mean, you're not really going to beat many teams, let alone a good team like Miami, in a situation like that. And that's another thing too. Miami's a good team and Carolina's not. I mean, I know that is hard for our listeners and subscribers to hear, but it's the truth. Like, Miami's a good team, and right now North Carolina is not. There's a reason that North Carolina is 16-10. There's a reason that Miami is 21-5. So it's you go back to, you didn't see this coming prior to the season, considering what UNC had coming back and the experience and all that. And for whatever reason, whether it's coaching, whether it's just not shooting well, it just hasn't worked. And I don't really see how it works moving forward. There's 5 games left now, 6 games left now in the regular season. And it's just like, what has this team done to give you hope this season that they can, do anything moving forward? I guess it's that variance. I guess it's just like, well, when they look terrible, usually they come out and maybe they'll play one good game and then maybe they'll have a good half and then they'll have a terrible half, and you just don't know what to expect. So I know we're going to move the conversation forward in a little bit, but um, now they go into a cauldron, a tempest, a hurricane, if you will, on Saturday,
A pot
and
of fish grease, Sherrell.
yeah, and that could be I'm not trying to be violent, but that could be like the kill shot to the season, in a place that hates UNC more than anything, and now they have to go into that on Sunday, so
So,
not looking great for UNC.
well, and you know what? Let's go ahead and move the conversation that way. If there has ever been a team that wants to, plant a stake in North Carolina's heart for any reason and in any shape, and again, not trying to be violent, there's a team that wants to snuff out a season uh, against North Carolina. It's the team they're going to play Saturday. And you mentioned, Sherrill, how hot that environment's going to be. It is. It's going to be a vat of fish grease, and it's going to be hot and scalding and pretty edgy, and probably will be unlike something they've seen even since last year, based on what transpired earlier this year in the Smith Center. Sean, schematically, is there anything that gives you hope that this team could win 3 of the last 6, 4 of the last 6? Or is it just one of those things where if they're making shots, great and hope, or you just go ahead and cross your fingers and hope for a good NIT seed? Yes, I am grasping at straws here, by the way.
No, I mean it's obviously frustrating watching what just happened in the second half. I think from a positive perspective is that they did really play three halves that for the most part we hadn't seen in terms of that ball movement and pushing the ball up the floor and playing together. And I think I would have liked to have seen, especially the start of the second half, when it started to go downhill, instead of letting it continue. Try to get everybody together and get them focused versus waiting for a TV timeout. But in terms of going forward, I mean, look, we haven't really seen Carolina teams quit, but you see teams each year where at the end of the year you can point to a game where they just didn't have it anymore. But I think we have seen 3 out of 4 positive halves offensively. I think, we talked about Pete Nance. Obviously, they're not getting, they didn't get anything from the 4 spot today. I think he, as Sherrell mentioned, he's overthinking everything. He's got happy feet, even his passing ability, which, I think a lot of people were high on coming in. Everything he's thinking through, and he's a second late on everything. Although I think defensively he's been positive in some aspects, but obviously Jordan Miller had some baskets on him today. So once again, I think if they want to move the ball, if they look to attack, I think today they were 24 of 35 from inside the 3-point line, over 60%. It's just a matter of, are they going to settle, or are they going to continue to be the aggressor and continue to play how we saw, or are they going to settle, wait until there's 6 seconds left on the shot clock? NC State, the first game, they're probably the most aggressive defense I think we've seen all year in terms of where they are guarding UNC out beyond the 3-point line, which did result in a lot of the trips to the foul line. But I think they're gonna do that again, and Caleb Love and RJ are gonna have to look to attack, but also look to dish. I think Caleb was doing a fantastic job of that, even if it wasn't always resulting in assists. But I think he's been really making the right plays up until when he started having to jack threes in the second half. And RJ has been at times. I think we need to see a little bit more out of him in those situations.
So in the event that NC State continues to be as aggressive, you talked about how North Carolina was somewhat successful the first time they played in getting to the foul line. That has not been the case since that game. I don't know if it was because of the discrepancy, which was the headline after the game about how many free throws North Carolina took versus how many the opponent took. But they have not had that many free throws since that game in the Smith Center. More importantly, they're missing free throws. Sean, in the event that that NC State does come out with that same aggression, if North Carolina is not able to get to the line, what's the adjustment?
Well, I think if they're not able to get to the line, it's still being aggressive and moving the ball with a purpose. And I think once again that was what we've seen, and even in that first half when they're down 1, I think they're still from a points per possession at around 1.13, which isn't great. Against Clemson, it was 1.3. points per possession, but 1.13 equals to what they had against NC State. But then they're down to, I think, point 0.6 in the second half. And it is attacking. I think going to Caleb's perspective, he is the guy that can get that extra step on the defender, especially if they are pressuring. And then is he going to settle for floaters, or can he attack, get to the rim, finish at the rim, or find the open man? And when he is kicking out, can Leaky or Puff or Nance, are they able to hit any shots? Because I think we've seen Leaky do it at times, but that's if you're an opposing team, you're going to say, hey, let these other guys hit a few before we're gonna respect it. And then defensively, I think it'll be interesting just to see the big man battle and how UNC looks to approach that, because I think that will also determine things, because Leaky's been playing fairly well from the wing, and that can go for him against Smith. So how will UNC, how will they go mano a mano in the post, and will Armando be able to stay out of foul trouble, because he's been picking up some pretty silly fouls the past few games, almost frustration fouls. And
after having none in the first half, he fouled out against Miami tonight.
Yep. So
Sherrell, I'm going to come to you, and I want to tee this up. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about it, but our guy Brian Ives just shared with me, or didn't share with me, shared with the Twitter world, a stat that is quite ominous. That North Carolina has lost 10 plus games in 4 straight seasons for the first time since 1949 to 50 and 1954 to 55. I share that in conjunction with the stat that I shared earlier about 6 assists on 29 field goals, and just what this team looks like right now. It's the losses, but also how they're losing. I throw this out here because fans should probably be aware this team is treading into very rare air, and not the great kind, after having such a nice finish to the season last year. I hate to just say, Sherrell, your thoughts, but I think you do a good job of laying out perspective for this. And again, we're not saying the season's over, but it's the chances of righting the ship are 2. They're slim and none, and Slim's packing up his stuff right now. Sherrell, what would you anticipate, the rest of this season could spell for the legacy of this squad?
I wasn't expecting that one. I think the legacy of this squad will always be Caleb's shot over Mark Williams in the Final Four. However, you have to look at it in totality, and when you start putting it together, I mean, this is among the worst 4 years when it comes to winning percentage and lack of ACC championships and lack of ACC regular championships and all those things that North Carolina has done consistently over the past, 60 years. This team doesn't have it, but they do have the feather in the cap. They have 2 of the 5, I would argue the 2 biggest non-national championship wins in program history is what I would argue. They have those. So it's kind of weird because I think fans will want to celebrate them forever, but it's going to be hard for them to get, the taste out of their mouth of losing the Clemson streak, of going 4 straight years with 10 or more losses, of being preseason number 1 and then being on the bubble for basically the 3rd straight year, of some of the things that happened, in Roy Williams' final season. I think all that stuff is going to leave some mixed feelings, I would say, but in the end, their legacy will definitely be the Caleb Love shot. And I think perspective a lot of times gets misconstrued for positivity. And I think in this situation, perspective is going to sound pretty negative, because there's nothing that this UNC team has shown this season, maybe outside of Clemson, maybe outside of a half against Notre Dame, but nothing consistently that leads you to believe that they will make some form of run. And I'm going to say it just like I did last year. And, I believed it last year when I said it, and I believe it now. How can they win? How can you think this team is going to win anything of consequence, considering what they've put out, on film over the last 26 games? At 26 games, it's not, oh, we'll make an adjustment here or play player X, a little bit more, and that'll switch things around. There's no savior on the bench. There's no savior on the court. It's got to be a collective effort. And I don't know that they have it in them. they've tried, and that's the other thing. People talk about effort, and I think effort is a big catch-all when people can't explain what they're seeing or
Yeah.
understand what they're seeing. It's not an effort issue with this team, in my opinion. They play hard, and I think they want to play together and play hard and play smart and all that good stuff. But at the moment, they're just not capable. They're not hitting shots. They're not hitting free throws. They move the ball around good inconsistently. They rebound inconsistently. They get good shots inconsistently. So it's kind of like what it goes back to at the beginning of the year. What is this team's identity? For a while, at the beginning of the season, we thought it was, oh, the guards are going to dominate, and junior guards, experienced guards win in March. Cliche, cliche, cliche. And that went out the window because they struggled collectively at the beginning of the season. And then after that Portland trip, it was
Mhm.
okay. This is going to be the Armando Bacot team. They're going to go to him as much as possible, and he's going to
Mhm.
get the ball. And to a large extent, that's been true, but that's not enough. And that's kind of where things are. It's just not enough. Bacot's been the only one outside of maybe a game or a half or two who's been consistent the entire season, and it's just not enough. It's just they're just not playing well enough. I mean, everybody is looking for like trying to go to a soothsayer to figure out, is it chemistry? Is it this? Is it that? They're just not playing well. They're just not a good team right
That's
now.
it. Yeah.
And I'll be curious to see, and I don't mean to sound cynical. I'll be curious to see how all of the off the court good vibes, we're a family stuff that was, kind of happened over the last week, how that carries over into Sunday. Because 5 days in between games in the middle of the season is a long time to let that sit and fester. So the hope is they flush it quickly and give it a good shot. But the plucky underdogs from Chapel Hill are going into the furnace that is into the furnace that is Raleigh, and they're not going to be favored. So just
That is
you got to have a
this
puncher's chance. That's what they have.
that is some elite level trolling by you, sir. The last thing I want to point out, February 16th of last season was the day of the Pittsburgh game, which was considered to be the bottom. And I think we all know that UNC's record at that time was actually worse than it is now. They were 18-8 at that point, and Pittsburgh was a much worse team.
So let me ask you this, Joey. Let's
Yeah.
be honest. Do
Mhm.
you think they've hit the bottom yet?
I think they did against Wake Forest, and then didn't have a ton to show for it. I mean, you got your bounce back against Clemson, and then the way that second half unfolded early tonight, just it was once again more of the same. Um,
Yeah. I
I
see. I
think,
think I think Saturday's going to be the bottom. Like
oh
I
man,
that just feels like a bad.
Oof.
I mean, Sean, we've talked about it
It
offline
is a bad
about
matchup. You're right.
guards who get in the face of RJ and Caleb. That's what they struggle with most, and that's what Joyner and Smith and Morcell and those guys are going to do. They're going to get in their face the entire game and try to. As crazy as it sounds, they're going to try to speed up Carolina, and I don't think that's such a bad move. So maybe they'll come out with their hair on fire and play a good game, but it looks ominous, as you said before. The
Well,
dark
and
clouds are swirling.
if there's some revenge to be extracted due to karma, you got to think there's going to be a foul flip the other way. And there are a lot of things kind of staring the Tar Heels in the face with this game against NC State, and they're not good things. Last thing I'll throw out there, just because I happened to think about it earlier tonight, is one of the things about the legacy of this team. It's going to really be tough to see if Armando Bacot ends up going the way Ed Cota did, in the sense that both guys wear number 5 and may not qualify for getting their name up in the rafters. And for a guy that's had the career that Armando Bacot has, both on and off the court, that's going to be a tough pill, I think, for folks to swallow in retrospect. Boys, before we get out of here, I'll give you your chance for your 2 pennies, and we'll give the Johnny T-shirt shout out before we get out. But Sean, you got anything you want to add? Again, I know this hasn't been as planned of a cadence because we're doing a post game show, but is there anything you feel like we missed tonight?
Not in terms of on the court. I think each game. Last week we are looking at how are they going to do over the final 8. I think each game is its own individual game. We've seen the highs and the lows, and as good as they shot on Saturday, it quickly reverted. And once again they can come out they can beat NC State, and we'll be talking about how are they going into at Notre Dame and UVA, et cetera, or they could lose, and then they're really on the outside looking in. I think if they do get in, there's really only one team you don't want to see, and I'd say that would be Houston. But once again, the preseason #1 team, this is not where I think anybody thought they would be. The other thing, just in terms of the future, a lot of high schools are starting their playoffs right now. So there'll be hopefully some good games coming up with the 23 and 24 guys, and we'll see how they perform and what they're looking like. So I'm excited to watch some of their games going forward, and who knows who might be here next year outside of Wiltshire and High, if anybody.
And going into Sunday, the Tar Heel team has, quite a long layoff. They have not been great after long layoffs this year. Sure, that's a stat you usually like to bring up. So they'll have some time to get right, and we'll see what happens. Sure, anything else you feel like we glossed over that you want to get before we get out?
I was going to say after that last break, the 7-day break before the Pitt game, they've lost 3 or 4 since. So, that's not great. Yeah, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan in the NFL, so I get to look at mock drafts a lot because the season typically is over in early January. And so part of my job, obviously covering recruiting for, IC, is to kind of look and see what's out there already and what they might be thinking and talk to sources and that kind of stuff. So, start looking at the transfer portal deadlines and when it opens and all that good stuff. And I think the guys on the team now who may or may not be back next season are better shooters than they've shown. So I think that's, something to look for moving forward. But I also think if they have the available scholarships, that they will definitely look to add some shooting. So like, go to the Big South and find the best shooter. I don't care how terrible he is on defense or how small he is or how tall he is. Go to the Big Sky and find some dude who shoots 48% and add him to the roster, because this shooting, really post Luke May and Cam Johnson has just been awful. I mean, if we're being honest, I'm not trying. It's not personal.
No, it's
Basketball.
I'm laughing because it's been that bad.
Yeah, it's been that bad for the majority of the last 3.5 seasons. And you cannot win in college basketball in 2023, playing a style where you're not making and converting a good amount of threes. People might think you can, but I don't believe it. And North Carolina, now they're not just bad shooting the last couple of years. They are the worst
Historically
shooting
bad
team in UNC history. And I think this will be 2 of the last 3 years, or 2 of the last 4 years have been the worst shooting teams in Carolina history. So I think on the recruiting trail, you might start to see that become more prioritized than it has in the past, just as a correction to what the roster has looked like, these last 2 or 3 years.
Sean, I'm assuming you have this new baby formula thing you want to share with us.
Well, just sorry, piggybacking on Sherrell. I mean, the power of the three. UNC did play. They're shooting over 60% from 2, but when you're just getting 2, and then all of a sudden you have Nigel Pack and they're just ripping off a few threes, it just makes life so much easier offensively when you're able to just get a few of those and kind of run up the score or keep it close if you're not playing that well. And once again, we saw the impact of that in Clemson. We saw the impact of that last year with Brady Manick leading the way, as well as what Caleb and RJ were doing. But this year, it's completely reversed. I think they're around number 330 now in 3-point percentage. And I think you go back to Hubert's very first interview, and he talked about, can he shoot? Can he shoot? Can he shoot? And unfortunately, this year that's not the case. We know how hard it is to find people from the transfer portal. I think UNC got the A+ on Manick, but outside of that, they've struggled. Miami had 3 other starters coming from transfers, with 2 of them really being up transfers from mid-major play. But it's difficult, it's challenging, and also trying to fit them into the pieces with really now what will be Hubert's second recruiting class. And how does that all look? But there's still NC State. There's still an opportunity, but the window is certainly closing,
And
unfortunately.
Joey wants to get off, and we just keep talking. But let me say one last thing. Like, I think we're responding in kind to what we saw. I don't want people. We get accused of being too bright sometimes, and I don't want people to accuse us of being too dark today, because it is dark. Like, that's it. I mean, North Carolina is on the verge of, one of the great, I would say, collapses in a season,
Yeah.
like, ever. Going from preseason number one, a team that went to the Final Four, to out of the tournament, has never happened before. And so you cannot take that lightly. You can't say, well, it's, just whatever. They didn't play well. And no, this is a big deal, and it should be treated as such. So I know this has been not a hopeful tone. There are still games left. The season's not technically over until the season's technically over, which could be as soon as 7 games, or could be as many as 17. Who knows? But I just want to say that, because we're not kowtowing to either side. We're just telling you what we see. And right now, what we see is a team that's not an NCAA tournament team, or shouldn't be an NCAA tournament team, that's struggling, that doesn't have an identity, but still has a chance, even however unlikely, to turn things around.
No, I think that's well said, man. Absolutely. And for all those folks, fans, Inside Carolina subscribers that were livid after the Portland law, or the Portland trip, like, now it's okay to be mad, right? Like, it's okay to have all that fatalistic stuff, because it's staring you in the face now. I don't think it was necessarily staring you in the face, though you could probably see some of it, and maybe pick some of it out. Then I don't think it was nearly what we're dealing with now. But who knows? We'll see what happens. That's why we play the games. I appreciate you guys being here. Hey, look, shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. We appreciate them sponsoring the show. I know I did not get a Johnny T-Shirt reading here, but it does not mean that we do not appreciate them and all that they do to support Inside Carolina and Inside Carolina content. Johnny T-Shirt premium subscribers get that extra 10% off the top of their already amazing prices. Hit them up. Hey, you want to buy you need to get rid of the shirt that you've been wearing all year because the mojo's bad on it? Go to Johnny T-Shirt. Best place to do, best thing to do. You'll at least feel better about it. And even if the mojo's not good on the new shirt, you'll at least have a new shirt out of it. Thank me later. Shout out to John Siegley for producing. We appreciate you guys being a part of the show. Hit us up with a 5-star review if you'd like to. We'd like to know how we're doing. Hopefully we're doing better than the team's doing on the floor right now. But either way, we appreciate you guys being a part of the show. Thanks to Sherrell McMillan. Thanks to Sean Moran. I am just Joey Powell. We'll catch you next time on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com.